Don't bother coming for New Year's, my mom declared coldly. I just smiled and announced, then don't bother using my card. That night, I canceled their gas, groceries, and mortgage autopay and let the cold remind them who was really in charge. I, 32M, stared at my phone screen, reading my mother's text for the third time. The words hadn't changed, but each reading made the knot in my stomach tighten differently. She had sent it at 9:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, which told me she had been stewing about this all day, waiting for the right moment to strike. The message was short, brutal in its efficiency. She didn't want me home for New Year's. My girlfriend wasn't welcome, and frankly, neither was I unless I came alone and stopped making everything about myself. I sat in my downtown apartment, the city lights blinking through my floor-to-ceiling windows, and felt something shift inside my chest. For 27 years, I had been the good son, the one who picked up the phone, who sent money, who fixed their problems from 3 states away. My younger brother lived 2 miles from them and couldn't be bothered to mow their lawn, but somehow I was the disappointment. The thing about being the family ATM is that people forget you're also a person. They see a checking account with legs, a solution to their problems, a safety net they never had to think about because it was always there. My parents had gotten comfortable. Too comfortable. I called my girlfriend over. She arrived 20 minutes later with Thai food and immediately knew something was wrong. I showed her the text, and she read it twice before setting down her phone with the careful deliberacy of someone choosing their words. She asked what I was going to do, and I told her I wasn't sure yet, but I was tired of being treated like a resource instead of a son. We talked through dinner, and she reminded me of things I had tried to forget. How my mother had made snide comments about her weight at Thanksgiving. How my father had pulled me aside at Christmas to ask for money for a new truck, then spent the entire dinner bragging about my brother's new promotion. How neither of them had called me on my birthday this year, but both had texted me their electric bill 2 days later. I pulled up my banking app and started scrolling. The autopay list was long, longer than I remembered setting up. Their mortgage payment went through on the 1st of every month. Gas and electric on the 15th. Groceries charged to my card twice weekly at their local store. Car insurance for both vehicles. My mother's prescription autopay. The lawn service I had hired because my brother wouldn't do it. The cable and internet bundle they insisted they needed. I had been paying for their lives for 3 years, ever since my father's business had gone under and they had declared bankruptcy. It was supposed to be temporary, just until they got back on their feet. But temporary had become permanent, and gratitude had curdled into entitlement. My girlfriend asked if I was really going to do it, and I told her I didn't see another option. They needed to remember what it felt like to be responsible for themselves. She squeezed my hand and said she supported whatever I decided, but I should be prepared for the fallout. I thanked her and told her I had been preparing for this fallout my entire life. I started with the mortgage. 3 clicks, and the autopay was canceled. The payment was due in 4 days. I moved to the utilities next, then the grocery store authorization. Each cancellation felt like removing a weight from my shoulders. My mother's prescription could stay. I wasn't a monster, but everything else went dark. Then I replied to her text. I kept it simple, told her that was fine, and I hoped they had a wonderful New Year's. I added that I had made some changes to my budget and they should check their accounts. I didn't elaborate. Let them figure it out. I slept better that night than I had in months. The next morning started quietly. Too quietly. I was at work when my phone started buzzing around 10 a.m. My mother's name flashed across the screen 3 times before I silenced it. Then my father called. Then my brother, which was unprecedented because we barely spoke. I let them all go to voicemail and focused on my quarterly report. During lunch, I finally listened to the messages. My mother's voice was shrill with panic. She had gone to buy groceries, and her card was declined. She wanted to know what was going on, why her card wasn't working, and I needed to call her immediately. My father's message was shorter, angrier. He said I was being childish, and we needed to talk like adults. My brother's message was the most interesting. He actually sounded worried, said Mom was freaking out, and could I please just call them back? I didn't call back. I texted my mother instead, told her I had canceled the card access as I mentioned in my text, and they would need to make other arrangements. I suggested they contact my brother for help since he lived nearby. The response was immediate and volcanic. My phone exploded with texts from all 3 of them. My mother said I was ungrateful, that she had raised me and sacrificed everything, and this was how I repaid her. My father demanded I reinstate the payments immediately or there would be consequences. My brother, surprisingly, took a different approach and asked what had happened, said there must be some misunderstanding. I responded only to my brother. I told him there was no misunderstanding. Mom had uninvited me from New Year's because she didn't approve of my relationship, so I had decided to uninvite them from my bank account. If they needed help, he lived 2 miles away and could step up. He read the message but didn't respond. The calls continued throughout the afternoon. I blocked my mother's number after the 7th call. My father I left unblocked out of morbid curiosity. He left 4 more voicemails, each one escalating from anger to bargaining to something that almost sounded like desperation. By evening, my brother called again. This time I answered. He sounded exhausted and asked what I wanted. What would it take to fix this? I told him I didn't want anything except to be treated like a son instead of a checkbook. He was quiet for a long moment before admitting that he hadn't realized how much I was covering. I asked him how he thought they were surviving on Dad's part-time contracting work, and he said he guessed he never thought about it. That was the problem, I told him. Nobody thought about it. They just assumed I would always be there, always paying, always solving their problems while getting nothing but criticism in return. He asked what I expected them to do now, and I said the same thing every other adult does, figure it out. Then I hung up. The next 3 days were chaos. My mother created a Facebook post about ungrateful children that was clearly about me, though she didn't use my name. Several aunts and uncles called to lecture me about family obligations. I blocked most of them. My father's brother was the only one I spoke to, and he actually listened. When I finished explaining the situation, he was quiet before saying that he had wondered how they were managing and now it made sense. He said he would talk to them, but I shouldn't expect miracles. The mortgage payment bounced. I knew because my mother sent me a screenshot of the bank notification with a string of accusatory texts about how I was making them homeless. I replied that they had gotten the foreclosure notice, which meant they had 30 days minimum to resolve it, and she should use that time to make arrangements. She called me a monster. I didn't disagree. My girlfriend asked if I felt guilty, and I told her honestly that I felt lighter than I had in years. The guilt was there, lurking around the edges, but it was drowned out by something stronger, relief. I had spent so long carrying their weight that I had forgotten what it felt like to just carry my own. On December 30th, my father called from my mother's phone, which I had blocked. He left a voicemail that was different from the others. Quieter. He said they needed to talk, really talk, and could I please come by the house? Something in his voice made me agree. I drove out the next morning, New Year's Eve day. My girlfriend offered to come, but I told her this was something I needed to do alone. The 3-hour drive gave me plenty of time to think, to rehearse what I might say, to prepare for whatever was waiting. Their house looked smaller than I remembered. The lawn needed mowing again. My father answered the door and looked older, more tired. He stepped aside to let me in without a word. My mother was in the kitchen, and the silence when I entered was suffocating. We sat at the dining room table, the same one where we had eaten countless family dinners, and nobody spoke for what felt like an hour. Finally, my father broke the silence and asked what it would take to fix this. I told him I wasn't sure it could be fixed, not the way it was before. My mother's face hardened, and she said I was being dramatic, that families help each other. I asked her when the last time she had helped me was. She blinked, clearly not expecting the question. I didn't wait for an answer. I laid out every payment I had been making, every expense I had covered, every problem I had solved for the past 3 years. I asked her when they planned to pay me back, or if they had ever planned to pay me back at all. The silence told me everything I needed to know. My father at least had the grace to look ashamed. He admitted they had taken advantage of my generosity, that things had gotten out of hand, but they were family and family was supposed to stick together. I agreed that family should stick together, which was why it hurt so much that they had excluded me from New Year's over something as petty as my choice of girlfriend. My mother started to protest, but I held up my hand and told her I wasn't finished. I explained that I was willing to help them, but not like before. Not as an infinite ATM with no appreciation or respect. If they wanted my help, things would change. They would need to come up with a budget, show me they were making an effort to support themselves, and treat me like a son instead of a resource. My mother asked what that meant, and I told her it meant calling me to talk instead of just calling when they needed money. It meant inviting my girlfriend to family events instead of excluding her. It meant my brother stepping up instead of leaving everything to me. My father asked what about the mortgage, about the utilities, about all the bills that were piling up. I told him I would cover January to give them time to figure things out, but after that they needed their own plan. He could go back to full-time work, my mother could get a part-time job, they could downsize to a smaller house, or my brother could contribute. But I was done being the sole solution to every problem. My mother's face went through several emotions before settling on something that might have been resignation. She asked if I was punishing them, and I told her no, I was establishing boundaries. She didn't seem to understand the difference. We talked for another hour, ironing out details and establishing expectations. It wasn't warm or fuzzy. Nobody apologized, not really. But there was an understanding, a shift in the dynamic that felt permanent. My father agreed to start looking for full-time work. My mother agreed to stop making comments about my girlfriend. They both agreed to involve my brother more instead of treating him like he was exempt from family responsibility because he lived nearby. I left before dinner, despite my father's half-hearted invitation to stay. The drive home felt different, lighter somehow. My girlfriend texted asking how it went, and I told her it went as well as it could have. We made plans to spend New Year's together, just the two of us, without any family drama. Update 1. January came with its own complications. My parents struggled more than I expected with the transition. My father did find full-time work at a warehouse, which wounded his pride but paid the bills. My mother took a part-time position at a local retail store and complained about it constantly in our increasingly rare phone calls. My brother, surprisingly, stepped up. He started covering their groceries and helped with smaller bills. The interesting thing about cutting people off financially is discovering who they really are when the money stops. My mother's calls became less frequent, which told me how much of our relationship had been transactional. My father called occasionally to update me on his job, never asking for money, which I appreciated. My brother and I started talking more, and he admitted he had resented me for years because I made everything look easy by just throwing money at problems. February brought the conversation I had been expecting. My parents wanted to talk about paying me back. I told them not to worry about it, that I considered it a gift, but they needed to understand it was the last gift of that magnitude. My father insisted on paying me something, so we worked out a small monthly payment that wouldn't strain their budget. I didn't need the money, but I understood he needed to make the gesture. My mother never apologized for the New Year's text. She mentioned it once, casually, saying she may have overreacted. I told her that was an understatement, but I appreciated the acknowledgement. She changed the subject quickly. Update 2. By March, my girlfriend and I got engaged. I called my parents to tell them, expecting drama or complaints. Instead, my mother congratulated us and asked about the wedding plans. It was such a normal, motherly response that I almost didn't know how to handle it. My father got on the phone and told me he was proud of me, which he hadn't said in years. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. The wedding planning brought its own challenges. My mother wanted to be involved, but kept making suggestions that required my money. I had to remind her several times that we were paying for the wedding ourselves, and her input was welcome, but her expectations needed to adjust. She pushed back initially, but eventually accepted the boundaries. My brother agreed to be my best man, which surprised everyone including me. We had grown closer through the whole ordeal, bonded by the shared understanding of our dysfunctional family dynamics. He admitted that cutting them off had been a wake-up call for him too, made him realize he needed to contribute instead of just existing on the periphery. The most unexpected development came in April. My parents sold their house. They didn't ask my permission or opinion, just did it. They bought a smaller place 15 minutes away, cut their mortgage in half, and suddenly had breathing room in their budget. My father called to tell me about it, said it was something they should have done years ago, but they had been too proud. Pride, I realized, had been the poison in all of this. Their pride in not admitting they needed help. My pride in being the one who could provide it. My brother's pride in staying distant to avoid the mess. Once we all let go of that pride, things started working. Update 3. We got married in June. My parents came, behaved themselves, and my mother even hugged my now wife without any passive-aggressive comments. It felt like a minor miracle. My brother gave a speech that made me cry, talking about how I had taught him that sometimes the hardest thing and the right thing are the same thing. Looking back now, 7 months after that text message, I can see how necessary that moment was. My mother's coldness had been the catalyst, but the problem had been building for years. I had enabled their dependence by always being available, always solving their problems, never demanding they meet me halfway. They had grown comfortable in their dysfunction because I made it comfortable. Canceling those payments wasn't about revenge, though it felt like it at the time. It was about forcing a reckoning, making everyone involved face the reality of our relationships. My parents had to confront their financial irresponsibility. My brother had to confront his absence. And I had to confront my own need to be needed, to be the hero, even when it was destroying me. The cold reminded them who was really in charge. Yes, but more importantly, it reminded them that I was a person with limits and boundaries. It reminded my brother that family responsibility wasn't optional. And it reminded me that love without respect isn't really love at all. It's just obligation dressed up in nicer words. We still have hard days. My mother still makes comments that needle me. My father still struggles with asking for help appropriately. My brother still forgets sometimes that he's supposed to be involved. But we're functional now in a way we never were before. We talk about real things, not just bills and obligations. We see each other because we want to, not because someone needs something. The mortgage is in their name now, paid from their accounts. The utilities are their responsibility. The groceries come from their budget. And somehow, miraculously, they're managing. Not thriving, not living lavishly, but managing, which is all any adult can really ask for. I still help sometimes, but it's different now. It's a choice, not an expectation. A gift, not an obligation. And that difference, that shift in dynamic, has saved our family in a way that continuing to pay their bills never could have. The text message that started it all is still in my phone. I keep it as a reminder of what complacency looks like. What happens when you confuse money with love and obligation with relationship. My wife suggested I delete it, move on completely, but I told her I wanted to remember. Not the anger or the hurt, but the moment when I finally chose myself. The moment when I realized that being a good son didn't mean being an infinite resource. That moment when the cold reminded everyone, including me, that warmth has to be earned. If you like this story, please like this video and subscribe us for more such real-life-based stories. Thanks in advance.